I came home from a work trip to find my belongings shoved in a flooded basement because my parents gave my bedroom to my sister. They demanded I keep paying rent for the concrete floor. So I left, cut their funding, and let the bank take their house. I am 26 years old. And I swear to you, I still get a sick feeling in my stomach whenever I think about the night I came back from that business trip. I don't know why, but my parents have literally always treated my younger sister, Mia, like she is the center of the actual universe. Mia is 23 now. She has never held a real job in her entire life. A few years ago, she decided that working a standard 40-hour work week was just way too toxic for her mental health. She decided she wanted to be a holistic wellness influencer on the internet. My parents, of course, thought this was a brilliant career move. They subsidized her entire life. They paid her car insurance, bought her expensive organic groceries, and let her live at home completely rent-free. I didn't get that luxury. I never did. When I graduated from college with a degree in supply chain management, my parents immediately told me that if I wanted to stay in my childhood bedroom, I had to pay market rate rent. I was making a decent salary at a logistics firm, so I agreed. I started paying them exactly $1,800 every single month. It was a lot of money, but I figured I was helping my family pay down their mortgage. Because I was paying so much, I asked if I could move into the large guest suite on the second floor. It had an attached bathroom and a ton of natural light. My parents agreed, and I spent about $5,000 of my own savings completely renovating that room. I put down new hardwood floors, bought a beautiful oak bedroom set, and set up a massive high-end home office so I could work remotely. It was my sanctuary. I paid for it, I built it, and I paid nearly $2,000 a month to live in it. About 8 months ago, my logistics firm landed a massive international contract. My boss asked me to fly out to our European headquarters in Berlin to oversee the transition. I was going to be gone for exactly 6 weeks. I paid my parents 2 months of rent in advance before I left. I locked my bedroom door, hugged my mom goodbye, and got on a plane. The trip was absolutely grueling. I was working 14-hour days, dealing with massive time zone differences, and living out of a cramped hotel room. The only thing that kept me sane was the thought of coming back to my beautiful, quiet bedroom and sleeping in my own expensive bed. I finally flew back home on a rainy Thursday night. My flight was delayed 3 times. By the time my taxi pulled into my parents' driveway, it was almost 2 o'clock in the morning. I was completely exhausted. I literally just wanted to drop my heavy suitcase, take a hot shower, and sleep for 3 solid days. I quietly unlocked the front door and tiptoed up the stairs so I wouldn't wake anyone up. I dragged my suitcase down the hallway to the guest suite. But when I got to my door, I completely stopped in my tracks. My bedroom door used to be a dark walnut color, but now it was painted this bright, tacky pastel pink, and the heavy brass doorknob with the secure lock that I had installed was completely gone. It had been replaced by a cheap, hollow interior knob. I honestly thought I was hallucinating from the jet lag. I slowly turned the handle and pushed the door open. I couldn't breathe. I just stood in the doorway staring into the room, and my brain literally could not process what I was looking at. My bedroom was completely gone. My expensive oak furniture, my mattress, my massive mahogany work desk. All of it was completely missing. The walls had been painted a bright, blinding white. There was a cheap faux fur rug on my hardwood floors, a bunch of massive ring lights set up in the corners, and a pastel velvet sofa sitting right where my bed used to be. They had turned my home office and bedroom into a content creation studio. I dropped my suitcase. It hit the floor with a loud thud, but I didn't even care. I walked into the attached bathroom. My expensive colognes, my electric toothbrush, my custom shower rack, everything was gone. The shelves were completely lined with Mia's expensive organic skincare bottles. I swear my heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I panicked. I thought maybe we had been robbed, or maybe they moved my stuff to a different room while I was gone. I ran back downstairs, turning on every single light in the hallway. I checked the hall closets. I checked the downstairs study. Nothing. And then I looked at the door leading down to the unfinished basement. Our basement is terrible. It is just exposed concrete fiberglass insulation hanging from the ceiling, and it floods almost every single time it rains heavily. We never kept anything valuable down there because of the dampness and the black mold. I slowly opened the basement door and flicked on the single, dim yellow bulb hanging from the ceiling wire. I walked down the creaky wooden stairs. The smell of mildew and damp concrete immediately hit my nose. And that is when I saw it. All of my belongings, my entire life. It wasn't even packed into boxes. My clothes, my expensive suits for work, my shoes. They had just been stuffed into thin, black plastic trash bags and piled into a massive mountain directly on the cold, damp concrete floor. My heavy oak desk was shoved into a corner, completely scratched and gouged on the sides like someone had dragged it down the stairs without even caring. My expensive mattress was leaning against a damp, cinder-block wall, completely unprotected. I walked over to the trash bags and ripped one open. My custom-tailored work shirts were covered in white, fuzzy mildew. The basement had obviously flooded while I was in Europe, and the water had completely soaked through the trash bags sitting on the floor. I just fell to my knees right there on the concrete. I felt this overwhelming, suffocating wave of pure betrayal. I was paying them nearly $2,000 a month. I had paid them in advance. And the exact second I left the country, they literally threw my entire life into a flooding, moldy basement, so my 23-year-old unemployed sister could have a pink room to film her yoga videos. I sat down there in the damp, freezing dark for maybe 20 minutes. I didn't cry. I was way past crying. I felt this deep, incredibly cold anger settling into my chest. I walked back upstairs, marched right into my parents' master bedroom, and flicked the overhead lights on at 3 o'clock in the morning. My dad bolted upright in bed. He was squinting against the bright overhead light, completely disoriented. My mom pulled the covers up and started yelling at me, asking what on earth was wrong with me for waking them up in the middle of the night. I didn't yell back. I just stood at the foot of their bed, completely drenched in cold sweat, and I asked them a very simple question. Where is my room? My dad rubbed his face and let out this heavy, annoyed sigh. He actually had the nerve to look irritated with me. He told me to turn the light off and go to sleep down in the basement. He said we would talk about it in the morning. I swear, my hands were shaking so badly I had to clench them into fists just to keep them steady. I told him I wasn't going to sleep in a flooded, moldy basement. I told him my custom suits were ruined, my mattress was destroyed, and my expensive oak desk was gouged to pieces. And you know what my mother said? She didn't apologize. She didn't look guilty. She just rolled her eyes and told me I was being completely dramatic. She said Mia's wellness channel was finally starting to get some traction online, and she desperately needed a professional space with natural light to film her morning yoga routines. She actually said that, since I was out of the country anyway, it was incredibly selfish of me to hoard the best room in the house. I honestly thought I was losing my mind. I looked at my dad, hoping he would inject some reality into the situation, but he just nodded along with her. He told me that Mia's career was a priority right now, and that as a family, we all had to make sacrifices to support her. I asked them about the rent. I reminded them that I had paid $1,800 a month for a specific room. I paid for 2 months in advance before I got on that plane to Germany. And that is when my dad dropped the absolute most insane, delusional sentence I have ever heard in my 26 years of life. He crossed his arms, sitting right there in his pajamas, and told me that the rent was for the privilege of living under their roof. He said it didn't matter which room I was in. And then, he actually told me that if I wanted to stay in the basement, my rent was going to stay exactly the same. $1,800 for a concrete floor. I literally couldn't speak. I just stared at them. They had completely justified stealing my room, destroying my property, and shoving me into a moldy dungeon, all while expecting me to keep funding their lifestyle. I didn't scream. I didn't throw anything. I think my brain just completely snapped into survival mode. I turned around, walked out of their bedroom, and went straight downstairs. I grabbed 2 heavy-duty trash bags from the kitchen pantry. I walked down into that freezing, damp basement, and I just started digging through the pile of my ruined life. I managed to salvage some casual clothes that hadn't gotten wet yet, my backup laptop, and my important documents. The rest of it, the custom suits, the expensive shoes, the mattress, I just left it there on the concrete. It took me maybe 45 minutes to pack everything I could carry into the trunk of my car. As I was walking out the front door for the last time, Mia actually came out of her new pink bedroom. She was wearing expensive silk pajamas that my parents definitely paid for. She leaned over the upstairs railing, looked at me holding my bags, and told me to please keep the noise down because she had an early morning filming schedule. I didn't even look up at her. I just walked out the door, locked it behind me, and drove away into the pouring rain at 4 o'clock in the morning. I didn't go to a hotel. I drove straight to my grandparents' house on the other side of town. My grandparents are my dad's parents. They are incredibly old-school, hardworking people. They don't put up with any nonsense, and they have always thought my parents completely babied Mia. I knocked on their door at almost 5 in the morning. My grandfather answered in his bathrobe. When he saw me standing on his porch, soaking wet, holding trash bags full of clothes, he didn't even ask questions. He just pulled me inside and locked the door. I sat at their kitchen table drinking black coffee, and I told them absolutely everything. I told them about the pink room, the ruined furniture, and the $1,800 a month for a flooded basement. My grandfather went completely red in the face. I swear, I thought he was going to have a heart attack. He was so furious, he actually picked up the landline phone to call my dad right then and there, but I stopped him. I told him I didn't want an apology. I didn't want my room back. I just wanted to be done with them. My grandparents told me I could stay in their spare bedroom for as long as I needed, completely rent-free. They told me to save my money and get back on my feet. So, I did. For the next 2 weeks, I completely ignored my phone. My mom sent me a few text messages asking when I was coming back to clean the rest of my junk out of the basement. My dad texted me a reminder that my next month of rent was due on the 1st of the month. They were completely delusional. They honestly thought I was just throwing a tiny temper tantrum and that I would come crawling back to their damp basement to hand them a massive check. But here's the thing, they completely forgot about me. I work in supply chain management. My entire career is based on analyzing logistics, cash flow, and financial dependencies. While I was sitting in my grandparents' spare bedroom, I started putting the pieces together. I thought about my parents' spending habits. I thought about Mia's expensive organic groceries, her car insurance, and the massive mortgage they had on that sprawling suburban house. And then, it hit me like a ton of bricks. My parents weren't making me pay $1,800 a month to teach me responsibility. They were making me pay it because they were completely broke. My rent wasn't just extra spending money for them. It was the absolute only thing keeping their massive mortgage from going into default. Without my money, they couldn't afford the house. They couldn't afford Mia's fake influencer lifestyle. They had literally kicked their only paying tenant into a flooded basement without realizing they were entirely dependent on my cash to survive. I smiled. I don't know why, but I just smiled the biggest smile I had in weeks. I blocked their phone numbers. I blocked Mia on every single social media platform. I completely vanished from their lives, and I just waited for the first of the month to arrive, knowing exactly what was going to happen when my check didn't show up in their bank account. The first of the month finally rolled around. I was sitting at my grandparents' kitchen table, drinking my morning coffee, and I just kept checking the calendar on my phone. Normally, by 8 o'clock in the morning, my dad would send me a thumbs-up emoji to confirm that my massive rent transfer had cleared his checking account. But this time, nothing. My automatic transfer was completely canceled. Because I had blocked their numbers, my phone was totally quiet. But I swear I could practically feel the absolute panic radiating from across town. I knew exactly how my dad operated. He probably checked his banking app, saw the zero balance where my $1,800 was supposed to be, and completely freaked out. The mortgage company doesn't care if your daughter needs a pink yoga studio. They just want their money. It took exactly 3 days for the reality to actually set in for them. On the 4th of the month, right around dinner time, there was a massive, heavy knock on my grandparents' front door. I don't know why, but my stomach just dropped. I knew exactly who it was. My grandfather stood up from the dinner table, wiped his mouth with a napkin, and told me to just sit there. He walked over to the front door and opened it. It was my dad. He didn't even look like his usual arrogant self. His hair was completely messy. He was wearing a wrinkled shirt and he looked incredibly stressed out. He tried to look past my grandfather into the house, demanding to speak to me immediately. My grandfather didn't step aside. He just crossed his arms and stared right at his own son with absolute disgust. He told my dad that he had no right to show up at his house making demands after what he did to me. My dad actually tried to raise his voice. He started doing that booming, intimidating dad routine, saying that I was legally a tenant and that I had skipped out on my rent payment without a 30-day notice. I honestly couldn't just sit there and let him yell at an 80-year-old man. I stood up, walked to the front door, and looked right at my father. I didn't yell. I kept my voice incredibly calm. I told him I wasn't a tenant anymore. I told him that throwing my belongings into a flooded basement and changing the lock on my bedroom door was a constructive eviction. My dad's face turned bright red. He pointed a finger at me and told me that if I didn't wire the $1,800 to his account by the end of the day, he was going to take all my trash bags out of the basement and throw them in the dumpster. I literally just smiled at him. I told him to go right ahead. I said the clothes were already completely ruined by the black mold anyway, so he was just saving me a trip to the dump. I swear, you could see the exact second his entire bluff completely collapsed. He lowered his hand. He looked down at the porch and his voice completely changed. He dropped the tough guy act entirely. He actually pleaded with me. He told me the mortgage was past due and the bank was threatening to hit them with massive late fees. He said Mia's wellness channel wasn't making any money yet, and my mom had already maxed out her credit cards buying organic groceries and camera equipment. He looked at me with these desperate, tired eyes and said, "We are going to lose the house. We need your rent money." I honestly couldn't believe what I was hearing. He was finally admitting it. They didn't kick me out because I was a bad son. They used me to subsidize their lives, and when Mia wanted my room, they thought I was pathetic enough to just keep paying them while sleeping on cold concrete. I looked at my dad, and I asked him why Mia wasn't paying the rent. He actually scoffed. He said Mia was an artist, and she couldn't be burdened with financial stress while she was building her brand. I don't know why, but hearing him defend her, even while he was begging for his financial life, was the ultimate closure I needed. I stepped back inside the house. I looked at my dad one last time. I told him that his mortgage wasn't my problem anymore. I told him to ask his favorite daughter to start doing yoga in the basement because I was never giving him another single penny for the rest of his life. My grandfather didn't even say a word. He just slammed the heavy wooden door right in my dad's face, turned the deadbolt, and walked back to the dinner table like absolutely nothing happened. I sat back down, and honestly, I felt like a massive, suffocating weight had been lifted off my chest. But I knew the bank wasn't going to be nearly as forgiving as my grandfather's front door. The financial clock was ticking, and they were completely out of options. The next few months were, honestly, they were incredibly peaceful on my end. I just went to work, saved my money, and spent time with my grandparents. I didn't hear a single word from my parents. Not a text, not a phone call, nothing. But I didn't need to talk to them to know exactly what was happening. Because through the family grapevine, I heard exactly how their entire house of cards completely collapsed. Because they didn't have my nearly $2,000 a month. They completely missed their second mortgage payment. And then, they missed their third. The commercial bank did not care about Mia's holistic wellness journey. They didn't care about her natural lighting or her organic groceries. They just wanted their money. After exactly 90 days of non-payment, the bank sent a formal notice of default. My parents completely panicked. They realized the bank wasn't bluffing, so they actually tried to list the house on the market to avoid a complete, devastating foreclosure. But I swear, this is where karma really stepped in. When the real estate agent came over to appraise the property and take listing photos, they walked into the upstairs guest suite, the room that I had spent $5,000 renovating with beautiful oak and neutral tones. The walls were painted that blinding, tacky pastel pink. The heavy, secure doors were gone. And worse, my dad had done a terrible job painting over the trim. And then, the agent checked the basement, the same basement my dad had let flood repeatedly because he didn't want to pay for a proper sump pump repair. The same basement where he let my expensive clothes rot in black mold. The agent took one look down those stairs and immediately flagged the house for severe water damage and toxic mold. Because the mold had completely spread up the drywall and into the floor joists, the house was practically unsellable for what they owed on the massive mortgage. Nobody wanted to buy a moldy house with a bright pink bedroom. About 6 months after I walked out of that front door, the bank officially foreclosed. They literally repossessed the entire property. My parents and Mia were given exactly 30 days to completely vacate the premises. I heard from my aunt that they had to frantically pack whatever they could fit into a rented truck. Because their credit was completely destroyed by the foreclosure, they couldn't even rent a nice place. They had to settle for a tiny, cramped 2-bedroom apartment in a really loud, terrible part of the city. And because it was only 2 bedrooms, Mia didn't get a massive pink studio anymore. She had to squeeze her bed into a tiny, dark room filled with all the leftover boxes my parents couldn't fit in the living room. Her holistic wellness channel completely died almost overnight. I don't know why, but I guess it is really hard to project a luxurious, peaceful, wealthy lifestyle to your internet followers when you're trying to film yoga videos in a cramped apartment with your angry parents arguing about money in the background. Last I heard, reality finally caught up to the golden child. Without my rent money to subsidize her life, my parents couldn't afford her car insurance or her expensive groceries anymore. Mia actually had to go out and get a real job. She is currently working 40 hours a week as a front desk receptionist at a local dental clinic. She has to wear a standard uniform, and she takes the public bus to work every single morning. And my parents. They are both working overtime just to pay off the massive credit card debt they racked up trying to pretend they were rich. As for me, my life has completely turned around. I lived with my grandparents for about 8 months. And because I wasn't throwing almost $2,000 a month into a black hole, I saved up a massive amount of my corporate salary. 2 months ago, I closed on a beautiful, modern townhouse right near my office. I have my own custom home office again with massive windows and brand new hardwood floors. But this time, my name is the absolute only one on the deed. Nobody can ever kick me out of it. I swear, sometimes I still think about that rainy night, standing in the flooded basement, staring at my ruined life in those black trash bags. I used to feel a tiny bit of guilt for not helping them out when they were begging. But then I remember the look on my dad's face when he told me I had to pay for the privilege of sleeping on a wet concrete floor. They pushed me into the dark, moldy basement just so their golden child could stand in the bright pink light. But they completely forgot one massive, incredibly important detail. I was the one paying the electricity bill.